Welcome back to the Drop Bass Not Bombs podcast. Today I'm joined with Elaine, also known as Neon Owl. How's it going?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm good. I'm so happy we finally get to do this. This was a long
Yeah,
time coming. I think this is 2 years in the making, so at least a
in a
year in the
minute.
making.
The Instagram to now.
Yeah, we
We're
got
here.
connected a while ago through a mutual friend, Emma Capotis. Shout out to her in the Rave Culture cast. We were both guests on her podcast. And I think it was, I don't know if it was when she came on mine or I came on hers, but she was like, you got to get connected with Neon Owl. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been a minute and we've just chatted and we met also at ADE, but I guess we finally made this happen.
Sometimes the best things have to wait. So thank you so much for joining us today. Can we start first by you introducing yourself, letting the listeners know who you are, where you're from, and what it is that you do?
Yes. So I'm Elaine. I am originally from San Francisco, currently and have been a while now living in New York. And I run Neon Owl. So I started Neon Owl with my brother, which is it started off as a music and charity platform. And over the years, it's also developed into an artist development platform where we host a lot of events all over the US, soon to be all over the world, I guess, as well as the virtual space, helping artists connect, collaborate, get signed, get booked, and really navigate the music industry. And we spark important conversations like mental health, diversity and inclusion. And so it's become this, we got coined recently as the philanthropist of EDM. So
Oh,
I
that's
guess
so
I guess it's
cool.
like one cool thing, but I would just say we're a community that's all about bringing people together through music, giving back to different, charities and nonprofits that can use it while helping artists at the same time.
Oh, I love that. I
Yeah.
love what you guys do. So I want to start from the very beginning. So before Neon Owl, what was your earliest electronic music memory? How did you get into EDM?
So so musically, I remember that my brother Ray, he had always listened to, I think it was DJ Tiesto back then, like not Tiesto. So like Tiesto, Armin. So I knew of the music, but I always actually grew up listening to a lot of, well, first off, like Chinese music, because my parents are from China. So I remember ever since I was a child, like, I don't know, a baby, they've always listened to Chinese music. So that was like my first music thing. And then over time, as I grew up, it was more pop, hip hop, and I always liked everything in between. But my first like EDM or electronic music true experience wasn't until I was in my early 20s. I want to say 23. Well, my brother took me to my first EDC. So that was like my first event, first rave, first anything. And that was EDC Las Vegas. So that was like, I think early Las Vegas when they moved the event, like it hadn't been too long. So that was my first ever festival experience. And my mind was like blown.
You're not the first person on this podcast to say that. I think it was Renee Soiree, who I had to formerly known as Bass Drop Princess. She also said that, like, oh yeah, my first rave was EDC Vegas. Like that's
No big deal.
people say that, or Tomorrowland or DEF CON or something like that. That's wild, because for me that was not the case. It was very much a slow, I've been listening to music for a long time at home when I was a kid in the 90s, early 2000s, and then my first rave was Steve Angelo in 2009 at a club in DC, and then Electric Zoo in 2011, and then slowly it built. But I can't imagine the first event being something with like 300,000 people. That's
Yeah,
or
it's kind
whatever.
of
That's
I guess
crazy.
the go big or go home because he had invited me to other smaller festivals like at Cow Palace or other San Francisco places. I was like, no, like I'm good. And he was like, you're coming to EDC. Like I bought your ticket. I was like, okay, well if you want to take it, then I guess I'm going to EDC. And so I went. I got all my outfits and everything like from Etsy, and it was like super expensive. I got this like black swan because I thought that's what you did, like you get these like cute rave outfits. So I got this black swan custom made $200 Etsy. Back then, Etsy was handmade. Everything was handmade. So then, and then on the first day, like all my feathers came off. I was like, okay, all right, well, next time I am not gonna buy $200 outfits to go to a rave.
Oh no.
Then I just started dressing more normal, like normal.
Yeah, I also went through, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but like real ups and downs in my festival fashion. If we look from the beginning in the 2010 era, it was all about the tutus and the fluffies and like fairy wings and like I don't know, Forever 21, very small dresses that were like questionable if it was a skirt or a shirt or a dress, but it was all three
Yeah.
kind of era. To then when I moved to the Netherlands in 2016, it was very much casual European, the track pants look. And then when I got into the content creating thing, it was very intense into outfits again. And now it's like it's a mix of both. It's gotten to the point where I'm going to so many things. I can't
Yeah.
wear a different outfit each time. It's not possible. There's just not enough space in my house. Like, and all it's just not possible. And then also just with the work that I do need clothes that are a little more practical and also a
Yeah.
little bit more conservative. You can't be like totally half naked when
Feathers
you're
not flying out.
yeah, feathers not flying off, things not falling off. I'm also a very aggressive dancer and I'm not very graceful. So I need something like sturdy.
You're like, dun, 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 dun,
Yeah,
dun.
like yeah, I like hard dance. So I just go hard. I'm just a rough and tumble kind of gal. So just
Yeah.
can't do it. But that's
T-shirts and hoodies is my recent last few years attire.
so funny. Yeah, I think over time too, you're like, this is just too, it just gets to be too much effort too when you go to so many events. Like it can't do full glam and full outfits for every single one. Now I kind of pick and choose. So I have a state of trance next weekend. I will be getting my hair braided from a local
Yeah.
braider here in The Hague. And I'm not sure what I'm gonna wear, but it's freezing in February in the Netherlands. So probably nothing too crazy. But yeah, I feel you with that. So was there any specific moment at EDC Vegas where you thought like this is what I want to do with my life, or was it more you became a fan and a raver first and then transitioned into Neon Owl?
Yeah, so I definitely remember like, okay, I'm gonna like rave for the rest of my life, which still is true, like whatever. 13 years later. But I think it was a little gradual over time because I had like, a really good job back then and just totally different, like not in the music industry at all. So that was good. Like that was like I didn't hate my job or anything. So I never thought about switching to the music industry. If anything, I always thought I wanted to work in nonprofit. So after going to a lot of festivals, I think I was having one of those like post-quarter life crisis after like 25, 26. I was kind of like, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Do I stay here and like climb this company or do I do something more meaningful? So around that time, I had come to New York because I've always wanted to live in New York ever since I was like a teenager. Or maybe I was 11 when I was in the womb in New York. So maybe it was my parents' fault. And then I went to San Francisco. Then at around 11, 13, whatever, I came back and I wanted to live here. So I ended up coming here to interview a lot of nonprofit founders to see what it would like to transition over to the nonprofit space. And what I found was there was a lot of rules and regulations. So like I would be talking to one specific charity, one cause, and I was passionate about many. And even the founders themselves was telling me like, yeah, in the nonprofit world, you need approval for this, approval for that. And I've always been very much of a rebel. So I was like, okay, that doesn't sound like fun. So I was like, okay, I don't want to leave one company where I did have a good amount of freedom, but I just wasn't in love with the industry. It was painting, construction, renewable energy to go do something I did love, but it seemed like maybe my presence wouldn't move the needle forward as much because of all the rules and regulations. So that was kind of my thought process in my mid to later-ish 20s, like 26-ish. And then I remember thinking like one time I was like buying festival tickets and then there was this like, would you like to donate like, I don't know, whatever amount of dollars towards this charity? And then I remember thinking, I was like, dang, man, this festival ticket's like $400. You should donate. So that was a very clear, I remember that memory. So I was like, I feel like the dance music space or, festivals, EDM, raves, there's so much like good vibes, like plur, right? Like peace, love, unity, respect. There's like this amazing culture of acceptance and just freedom and being who you want to be. And then at the same time, like DJs, they have so much influence that they are underutilizing, I would say, because a lot of DJs are kind of like behind the scenes as in their music, but you don't know them. They're not like in the forefront of things, unlike your Billie Eilishes or the, whoever, other pop stars or more famous celebrities in other genres. So I just remember thinking like it'd be really cool to somehow work with festivals, music lovers, DJs to raise money for different causes. Because that, filled my need for like variety. I was like, I don't want to work with one nonprofit. I want to work with many. So then that was one thought, like in the back of my head floating somewhere. The second thought was a lot of my friends had 9 to 5s as well, and some of them liked their jobs better than others. So those that didn't like their jobs, I remember festivals always being an escape, right? That wasn't really the case for me, but a lot of times it was like this, like couldn't wait for this festival or this show or this weekend. And when it was like the last day, there was this gloominess of like, oh no, it's the last day. And then when it's like we're all headed back, it's like this like depression of like, oh, back to reality. So I was like, that's kind of like nothing wrong with that. But I was like, I wish we could bring like the festival outside of the festival walls. So that was like another thought that was like brewing somewhere. And then one day, I think I was going through like a pretty tough time in my life personally. And I was like, I don't know, seeking for the meaning of life. Those once again, post-quarter life crisis. So I was like seeking for the meaning of life. And I was like, I think that all that this job has to give me is like more money, more whatever. But it wasn't like fulfilling me. And that's when I thought of maybe starting something of my own that could inspire other people, right? Spread love, spread joy, and also spread support and money to those people that need it, right? That are less fortunate than those of us that are paying, $300, $400, $500 for a festival ticket. So that's when the idea of Neon Owl, which was still very hazy, came to me. I was like, oh, maybe we'll like sell t-shirts. Let's do blogs. Like, let's share stories. Let's like ask DJs to talk about nonprofits they care about. It was this big jumble of things that was in my head that I like vomited on my brother. And I was like, let's start this thing. He was like, oh, that sounds cool. I don't know how you're gonna do it. I was like, when there's a will, there's a way. Like I was just, very optimistic, kind of blind and a little naive. But also like my background has always been in biz dev and sales, and I went door to door in college. So I have like pretty thick skin. So I was like, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
We started Neon Owl and then I quit my job. Yeah.
That's an amazing story. I have a lot of questions about that. But first I want to say I have a kind of a similar story. I was like smiling a lot during your story. I came up with the idea for Drop Bass Not Bombs when I was in college. So 2012, 2013, toward the end of college. And I said, when I'm a famous, like rich old lawyer in my 60s, because at this point I was on a trajectory to pursue a career in law, I'm going to start Drop Bass Not Bombs as a way to give back to the scene, because the scene gave me so much. I mean, it still gives me so much every day. But I said, I'm going to start a nonprofit where I throw raves for charity, because similar to you, I also thought there's this $1 billion, I don't know how many $1 billion the EDM industry is worth, but there's this billion.
It was like 7 or 8 when I looked, like way a long, long time ago.
It's got to be way more now, especially with the prices of everything. And there's a lot of reasons. But yeah, I just thought, like, why do all these other genres of music have charity concerts? And the big one I looked at was Live Aid, right? Back like in the 80s. Why do all these other genres have big charity events and EDM doesn't? And why are tickets so expensive? And why don't you hear DJs talking about causes that are important to them? And like you said too, with pop stars, like there's pop stars like Lady Gaga, who has a lot of like causes and things she believes about. Why don't you see DJs like that? And this, again, in the 2010s, it wasn't really a thing. So I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And then, yeah, kind of like you, like, I was also very naive, and I was like, I'm just going to do it. Like, you don't need any money. Like, no, you actually do. There's a lot of things that go into organizing events. And
we'll get into that.
We'll get to that later on this story. But yeah, so I definitely can relate. But I think where our stories are very different is I was in school when I came up with the idea, and then I started Drop Bass Not Bombs when I had no money and like no job. Not no job, but I don't know. I was like working in nightclubs and things like that. But what I'm curious to know, so you had a stable job, and then you decided to leave to start this amazing project, to start Neon Owl. was that a really hard decision, or was it just something that you knew, like, this is what I'm meant to do?
Mhm. Yeah, so I have always been one of those people that like sometimes things can come to me really fast, right? It doesn't matter if it's a gut feeling, a relationship, an ending of a relationship, like whatever it is. I usually like have a feeling, I think about it, I decide on it. Then like do some sort of like, Facebook status or like MySpace status, but like I'll just like put it out in the universe because that like creates accountability, right? So for me, it was like, okay, this thing seems really scary to like start my own thing. I obviously didn't broadcast I was going to quit my job, but I did. Like I wasn't going to like do that to my company because we worked out like, hey, I was going to phase out and I'll help you hire someone. But I did declare that into the universe really quickly because I knew that like most times in life when we like dwell on something that we really want to do or we hesitate, right, to ask for something or I don't know, whatever, people trying to like talk to someone they're interested in, like they'll kind of let that moment pass them by. So for me, I was already feeling like unfulfilled. The only thing that was fulfilling was the money, which was not fulfilling enough. I was like, oh, it paid for all my festivals and travels. And I just knew that, I don't know, if I felt this passion or desire to start something and I didn't do it right away, like waiting wasn't gonna give me more confidence. Like, because I not like I knew anyone in the music industry anyway, so there was no like reason to wait. It was more of like, okay, I should do it now if I feel the excitement towards it. And I feel less and less excitement each day with my work. So that was not challenging of a decision. The more challenging thing was the financials. Like I also spent like I made. I did not take precautions or like think about saving. So I just kind of spent like whatever I made. So that was one issue. And I also was like helping support my family, right? And my parents. So that was another issue. And then, of course, a third issue. My parents are from China. They're hella Chinese. And all they wanted from me was, go to school, get a good job, like get, good money, multiple cars, multiple houses. So it was more of coming out to my parents in that way. That was more the battle.
So how did they respond when you told them what you were going to do?
Not great. But I also took a really, really long time to tell them because like I'm the type of person that like I'll be really honest and I'll share, but because of our, I don't know, my upbringing and the way that our relationship has been always strained due to culture, like we're very close, but we also have like many disagreements, such as like what they expect a traditional Chinese girl, good girl to do and I've been always the opposite of those things, right? Like, I don't date Chinese people. Like, not that I don't, but like, I've dated non-Chinese. I'm like, why are you doing that? Why did you get a job in sales instead of something that's more, respectable, stable? Because I actually did take the lowest income job that I was offered out of like multiple options, but that ended up generating me the most amount of income over a short period of like few years. So then they were okay with it, right? So then now they're like, well, why don't you keep this like prestigious job? Like, why would you want to like leave? It took me a long time to tell them. I was like, oh, I'm like kind of phasing out and kind of doing this. So I was really scared to tell them because I knew how they were going to react based on all the times they reacted on other crazy decisions I've made that they didn't approve of. So that definitely did strain our relationship for many years. And like I would say only in the last 1 or 2 years did they start coming around to accepting what it is that I do because I finally started making money. So the first 7 years I didn't make money. So that was another thing. They're like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then, I always supplemented my income with like other coaching, consulting, like other entrepreneurial stuff I did. And so only in the last 1 or 2 years, because income started coming in, were they more accepting. And they are also started meeting some of the artists in my community that they saw like the impact of what Neon Owl did for them. And then they were like, oh, like you guys are helping people, like you guys are helping making dreams come true. And because they've now met those people and they have a relationship, it became more real for them. It wasn't like this, what are you doing to party? Like thing, like party, you're too old to just party. I'm like, I'm not partying, guys. Like I am, but it's
Yeah.
work. It's a work party, like
I can relate to that. I mean, I think the previous generation and it had a different way of doing things. You in your 20s, you got married, you had a house, you had kids, you stuck with one job, and that's it. You stayed at the same job for 30 years, and that's it. I think our generation and the generation below ours, it's a lot of like gig jobs. If you're in school for much longer, people might not get married, or you get married later, or you decide to have a kid later, or not at all, or the family dynamics look different. It's different now. And then also I think electronic music in general does get a bad reputation. A lot of people just see it as partying, and yeah, we are. I mean, to be honest, I'm having a great time. I'm not going to lie. When I'm at these events, I'm having a blast. I have the time of my life. But it's also work. I take it extremely seriously, and I have found a way to balance having fun and professionalism and working there. So, but yeah, I can definitely see from an outside perspective, people think, oh, you're in your 30s, like and sometimes I do feel that, because a lot of people who I did used to go to raves with, especially my college friends, like they stopped, like they all have like children now, homes.
like, I'm too old. I'm like, you're too old if you say you're too old.
Yeah, I had the corporate raver. I don't know if do you know the corporate raver?
A little bit, but not well.
Yeah, she's like 36, I think, maybe, yeah, 36, something like that. And she has a very corporate job. She also does something in sales, fancy sales. And yeah, and she's big on TikTok and Instagram, and she goes to raves all the time. And her big thing is like, you're never too old. Like, and you can still have a career and a corporate job and all these things and still also have fun. And I love that, because I'm all about that too. Like, it doesn't need to be one or the other. And if you're done with it, you're done with it, but you don't have to be. Keep going if you want.
Exactly.
So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Is there anything now looking back that you wish you could have done differently, or are you one of those people that's like, I have no regrets?
Yeah. I would say I definitely have no regrets. Like, I don't regret how I treated everything and like each decision I made. But if I were to like smarten up, right, and give myself back then some advice, I would say, it would have been ideal to have some money saved, because, and I always tell this, like I get asked this a lot. They're like, well, you quit your job. Like, should I quit mine? I'm like, no, because quitting your job and being like backed up against the wall, yes, it could be great for some people when there's no plan B, right? Like, I feel like I'm one of those people. It's like, I don't care. I'll figure it out, because there's this certain level of pressure that like you just need to make it work. So for me, I never considered like going back, even if I was broke, which I was for like many years. But it would have been so much nicer and less stressful to have some money in the bank. That's one. That's like one piece of advice. That's why when oftentimes artists, right, DJs, producers, aspiring artists ask me like, should I quit my job? I was like, okay, it depends on what type of personality you are. If you are kind of like me, you're kind of crazy and you're like a psycho and you don't mind and you'll make it happen, sure, you can. But know that I have seen many people like crumble under that stress of not being able to pay the bills while trying to pursue your passions, right? And this thing that takes up so much energy, and like it's your baby, right? There's so much creative energy, blood, sweat, tears, and all of that put in. So if you're the type that gets stressed and overwhelmed easily, or like you're not a high level, like let's say risk taker, that can actually cause you to quit your passion, aka your business venture, your artist project, and like just give up. So I always tell people like, don't do as I did, like assess your own risk tolerance and then like go about it. So that's like one. I wish I had more money saved in the bank. Two is I don't regret this. Like, I'm very glad I treated this as like a passion project and a community from day one, because that's reaped a lot of, I guess, rewards, in the sense that because we came from a place of like serving, there was no money. Like, I was very like corporate to like, oh, hippie, like not hippie, but like, oh, forget about money. Like, because I treated Neon Owl that way from day one, we stayed very authentic. It was like, okay, how can we get this message out? How can we share this story? How can we inspire people? How can we give back? So I feel like we built a lot of authentic, genuine, like fans, community, like artists, festival goers, like who are part of Neon Owl now. Whereas if I started like business, like maybe it would have ended differently. I cannot confirm or deny like which would have happened. But in hindsight, if I were to have give myself a piece of advice, it would be like, okay, treat your baby, your passion project, your community a little bit more like a business. Even if it's not about money first, money first, money first, like it would have been nice to have some of the infrastructures or like a bird's eye view of like, where are we going? Instead of just blindly doing like plur and good vibes and like charity stuff, like, which is all great. But I think that led to a much longer period for us to like finally make money, which also came organically through our fan base, our audience, our artists, our community. They actually asked for something paid, a paid program, right? Open door sessions was never about making money. We barely broke even, and whatever we made extra would go to charity, right? But if we had more of a business plan, I think that the money could have come sooner, which then would lead to bigger impact. Because we talked about like doing charity shows. That shit doesn't just take passion. That shit takes like money, effort, time, resources. So I feel like if I treated Neon Owl more like a business from day one, our impact likely would have gone further to the charities, to the artists, to expansion. So those are all not regrets, but like pieces of like advice that I would have given myself from day one if I could go back.
Yeah, for me, it's really similar. Like, I have no regrets in my life in general. Everything has happened for a reason. But yeah, looking back, I would definitely have done things differently, of course. Similar to you, I just didn't see money in the same way that I see now. I think when I was young, I really thought like, oh, it doesn't matter. I don't need money. Like, I always found ways to figure things out. I'm very resourceful. You could literally put me in any situation. I like figure it out. I always got by. I always figured it out. I always worked a million jobs, like found ways to make things work. But then as I got older, I was like, I don't really want to do that anymore. I want like
So
some
why is it so hard?
yeah, why is everything so why do I work so much for so little money? I think I didn't really start seeing that until recently. I started drop based on bombs with no money, just thinking like I'll find a way to make it work. And I didn't really see it as a passion project. I think I saw it as a way that it would just happen. And like, yeah, I'm just going to put in the hard work and it's going to happen. And I think Corona really shifted things because prior to Corona, we had two events for Drop A's Not Bombs, and they didn't raise that much money. I learned that you need money to organize.
Money to raise money. You're like, damn it.
Yeah, like what?
Damn it.
Mind blown. Yeah, so that's one thing I learned along the way. Like, you can't just like throw a charity event with no money. Like, you need to have resources, and you need to have like you need to have more than just like a bunch of friends with an idea. And like looking back, we can laugh at it now, and it was beautiful, the events that we had. We had one for Musicians Without Borders, and we had one for the Amazon conservation team, and that was great, and there was so much passion there. But thinking about it now, like, yeah, I would have organized things differently and would have set money aside and done things a bit differently than I did. But hindsight's 2020, and Corona really put things into perspective, because I did have a third event planned, and that was supposed to be for May of 2020. And obviously that got canceled. Everything was closed here from March 2020 until February 2022, basically. And then I shifted to live streams and podcasting. And then it just really, I made an Instagram story about it, I think yesterday, because I was talking about going to a state of trance. And yeah, just Corona made me think like I need some stability in my life. Like, I don't want to just be working random gigs, random jobs here and there. Like I kind of wish I did have a corporate or stable career before I started Drop A's Not Bombs, because I didn't. I had an internship that ended, and then I started Drop A's Not Bombs. So
yeah.
and now like I have a stable job. And yeah, these are just all things like you don't think about in your early 20s. It's just like, oh, I'm just gonna figure it out. It's like, well, you probably should have figured some things out before you registered a company at the Chamber of
Yeah, an
Commerce.
LLC and have to pay for everything and everything.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, there's so many benefits of having a business, and there are, but there's also a lot of costs and also just things I just didn't think about. And not every DJ is going to play for free. We did have to pay some of the DJs, of course. There's money that goes into promoting events. There's costs with venues. There's just things that I just did not think through. But like I said, I look back in those memories really fondly. Things are different now, but yeah, it's cool to have that insight. And I hope who's ever listening to us, if you do decide to, get into the charity rave business, or
hopefully you have more than $1,000 in the bank account, guys.
I think I had less. Yeah,
yeah. That's the LLC. If it's in California, that shit's already like $800 or something. I don't like that. My brother does all that, but FYI.
FYI, think things, come up with it, treat it like a business, come up with a business plan, have money set aside. Don't quit your 9 to 5 until you're 100% sure. What I see people doing now, which I think is cool, is instead of just quitting their 9 to 5 and going all in, is they go part-time. So a lot of my friends in the creative space, I see them switching to part-time from their full-time jobs and then having their creative projects. I'm not doing that. I work more than full-time, and then I have like 19 creative projects. So I also don't recommend that.
Caffeine, probably.
A lot, yeah, a lot of caffeine. I love my coffee and my energy drinks, and then just a lot of I guess I still have that resourcefulness of just figuring it out. It's just now I'm like older.
Yeah. And why?
Older, wiser, question mark, a little bit. So I want to jump in now. We talked a lot about the past, but jump in now to everything that you guys are doing now with Neon Owl. So all of your programming, can you walk us through the process of curating events, both online and live stream, and just talk to us about like what's your day-to-day look like now?
Yeah,
I am a heavy sigher.
If there's a video, then that's how my day-to-day looks like. Well, so it's funny because like it was funny. My fiance and I were talking about this early pandemic because we had always been an in-person thing. Yes, we have our blog, our website, but a lot of our events and open door sessions, that were curated for the artists and the community, they were always in person, like we did San Francisco, Bay Area, LA, right? And I moved back to New York. And shortly after I moved back to New York, the pandemic hit. And so that's when we started pretty early on in the pandemic, because around that time, I think the whole industry was hurting. And I had already been like just really burnt out from everything Neon Owl. It's really challenging when you're trying to build a community and events and like give back and everything, but yet like $0 or -dollars are coming into the bank account.
Yeah.
And then I was just really like, I remember being really fatigued and tired. And then the pandemic hit. So I was like, it was like a forced break. So I was like, oh, maybe this is the break that everyone needs. Okay, I will take it, like the pandemic. And then, but shortly after, it wasn't long until I was like, okay, maybe I can't sit around and twirl my thumbs. You were hearing all these like crazy stories of just like, I don't know, like no, everything shut down, right? Everyone losing their 100% of their incomes and like relying on like EDD and everything. So like, I think around that time, I was like, oh, I think I got to do something. So like, I pretty much was like, okay, I'm going to start open door sessions virtual. So I was like, all right, I can't just like sit on my ass, I was just like, okay. So I started open door sessions virtual, which was pretty much the same, right? The idea behind it was, let's bring the music industry together, talk about both like music business things, right? To help aspiring artists, because what I didn't know at that time was during the pandemic, there was a huge wave of artists that decided they wanted to become artists, and or people that were already kind of dabbling that decided to go full in, right? There's also the opposite end. People were like, okay, also some people also quit, right? And left the music industry. But during the pandemic was when everything was possible because everything was on the internet. So to Neon Owl, that actually worked to our advantage, even though we didn't think of that at the time. Like what we did think about was like, okay, how can we make everyone just a little less depressed? Let's host a talk, right, on mental health. And we had all these different people. We had like Brownies and Lemonade, like Billboard Dance, like red light management. Like we had a lot of our like DJ friends come and just talk about the current landscape of the music industry, where we see it going, and how are we doing? And literally, some people that were like doing big things, they're like, honestly, how I'm doing is just surviving on like my EDD checks. So those are very open and vulnerable conversations. And at the same time, we still did our demo listening parties and all that. So it was this weird thing. I remember that our first event, one of our first events, it was just everything was happening with like Black Lives Matter too. And it was like, oh, we're like, should we do the event? Should we not? And then it was like, okay, everyone's hurting. We need to like heal, because music is the universal language that connects us all, right? Like, not to be cheesy, it is like that healing medicine. So we're like, let's just like do it. And that ended up being the best thing, because I think what ended up happening was there wasn't a lot of events like this, like open door sessions in itself. You don't really see a lot of events that bring together more established people, influential people in the music industry, and then up and comers. And if it is, it's usually more like curated, like there's a certain level of separation. At our events, we're like everyone, like there is no like there is a stage, but there's no stage. Like everyone mingle, everyone talk to one another. It ends up being very open, welcoming, like no egos. So I felt like that same culture did transcribe over to the internet space. And so it ended up being all these people from all over the world, like India, China, Mexico, Europe, US, Canada, Russia, like they all came together, and it was this really cool healing thing. And then it also made people feel seen, I think, seen and heard. And so that actually really blew up Neon Owl, which was super unexpected. Like I just thought like, okay, we're just doing this thing to be a little less depressed, myself included. But we just started getting these overwhelming amount of messages saying like, oh my God, like where have you guys, where have these events been like our whole lives? And people started coming back. And I think that's when the true super fans, right? Like there's this book called Super Fans, like kind of came along, and they kept coming to the events, like every single event. And eventually they were like, hey, like we pay way more money than, AKA your free ticket or your upgraded VIP donation ticket, which was like $25, $35. We've paid thousands of dollars for like other things, right? Marketing course, this course, DJ course, whatever course. But this is like a holistic way of looking at and approaching the music industry. And we're getting those connections, like literally like face to face, like on a call where everyone's on video. They're like, how can we get more of this type of coaching or accountability or speakers and education? So that's when we soft launched, right? Beta launched the mastermind program, which was like, think of it like the artists from Open Door Sessions, but the super serious ones that they want more and they really want to pursue this as a thing. So we started with 6 people, I want to say. This was towards like the tail end of pandemic lifting, I would say, like pandemic lift. And then we slowly grew that. And so now we have our general Neon Owl stuff, right? All our feel good, do good, festival content, like give back initiatives, which we started with. We start partnering with other shows, other venues, other festivals, right? Like Groove Cruise on programming, on stages. So we still get to do that charity component, and we still get to do the show component. Now I'm just not trying to figure out how I can empty my entire bank account to do one show, right? So it's like I got smarter over time. So we're still doing that. We're doing open door sessions in a lot of the major cities all over the US, SFLA, New York, Denver. We're launching Atlanta in like a week. Vegas, Miami. Then we partner with like venues like 1015 and SF, Larimer Lounge in Denver, Groove Cruise, like an ongoing partner. So we do a lot of the programming to try to not just go to the party, but like bring the party and the scene together to create connection and collaboration while raising money for different charities at the same time. And then, of course, now we have the mastermind program, right, which is like a group of now 20 something people. We've grown very slowly because I've been very selective about like who joins the program over the last 2 years, 2+ years now. So we're really developing those artists. to kind of summarize on all of that, when you ask what my day-to-day looks like, when I went and started open door sessions virtual, I was telling like my fiance, I was like, oh, like, yeah, soon things will be easier, because now, things are virtual and things are going pretty well. And he was like, babe, trust me, the more you do this, the crazier your life will be, because that's kind of been the theme of Neon Owl, right? We started as one thing, which we still are, but then came another branch and another branch and another branch and another branch. And now I'm starting two other branches. So it's like this owl tree that's like now 10 branches. And hence my daily life is just either on the road, right? Going to festivals, launching new cities of open door sessions, this and that. We're going to launch like in Amsterdam this year and who knows where else. And then a lot of times it's me sitting on this specific chair or a WeWork for like so many hours that like I have like back problems. So it varies, right? It's either I'm on the road or I'm like stuck to my chair, like working away, and it has not slowed down.
I mean, that's amazing. You guys do so many things. And yeah, I had the privilege of being in one of your mastermind sessions back in November. And I love the community that you built. And I was telling you after too, I'm like, this is so cool. Like so many, the group that you've built, the artists that you had, they were just so passionate. And yeah, I gave like a workshop and just hearing their questions, like I loved how engaged everybody is because I don't know. Sometimes people sign up for a course or a webinar or a program and they're like half into it. I mean, I had that too. Like, I'm sorry to the Dutch lessons that I've taken here in the Netherlands. There's like many that I was like half paying attention, like doing like 9 other things while especially when it's online, like, I don't know, you're on Instagram or like whatever, doing like all sort of like paying bills, like checking the news, like it, but I felt that the people in your class, they were extremely engaged. Like they wanted to ask me questions and we were talking about it before this interview too. A lot of them reached out to me after too, thanking me for my time or follow-up questions or, hey, cause I told them like, if you want me to listen to anything or look over anything. And so they were sending me press kits and things to check. And that just shows a lot of effort. I mean, it is a really hard industry. I'm glad that I'm not a DJ or producer. Like it just sounds so hard.
Me too.
So hard. The market is so saturated, especially here in the Netherlands. Literally everybody is a DJ.
15-year-old is a DJ too.
Every 15-year-old is a DJ. And like at Amsterdam Dance Event too, like think of how many people were there with their like USBs or their demos, lining up for the demo drop, trying to talk to Martin Garrix, get networking. I mean, we did a lot of networking too, but like I'm just really glad that I can't imagine trying to be an artist. So I have a lot of respect for them. It's a lot of work and it's hard. So what you're doing is really cool. You're making it really accessible for them to network. You're bringing in all these, professionals and other artists and like getting visibility. And I think that's really hard to do. So that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think like one thing to kind of go back, like one aha moment I found is everything in our community had been free or like super cheap, like, oh, donate to like animal rescues and get like demo priority ticket for like $35. So my brother and I had this like aha moment, which was when they asked for this like program, they're like, we want more. How can we pay for this program? And we beta launched it. I was like, oh, these people are not only showing up all the time because they have so much skin in the game. And it's not like it's a super expensive program, but they were like, we had this aha moment. I was like, wait, we've been doing free this whole time for like 7+ years. And you see people come and go. There's still some really committed people, but people kind of come and go. They're kind of like, maybe they'll pause for a while and they'll come back to the event and they'll produce again or whatnot. But like you said, to your point, like these people were like, we're watching Amy, we're taking notes, because I feel like they have skin in the game. So one aha moment was like, oh, wow. So when you charge for something, people are actually more committed and they're like showing up and they want to also show up to the in-person events in different cities because they know that they're going to reap the benefits of having those face-to-face with decision makers. And we're like, oh, so this is what it takes to get like commitment from people. It's like they're all in because they committed to something and they put their money down for something. And we're still serving all of the free community, of course, but we're like, okay, the level of commitment and therefore progress is like really visible because they're here ready to learn, absorb, network, and like put their music out there and release music and play shows and all of those things.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like when people make that investment, they're definitely more committed. But you still sometimes have people who sign up for coaching and don't do anything, or my Dutch class example. I mean, that did cost me money, and I also did. I mean, eventually I did pay attention, and I got what I needed to get out of it. But yeah, that's it can be challenging for sure. So we're coming kind of towards the end now. I want to get into some personal questions. One topic that's consistently come up on this podcast and that you've spoken about as well is mental health. So how do you take care of your mental health personally, doing all the things that you do? And then how do you promote mental health within Neon Owl? Because going back again with the difficulties that artists face, I mean, we've seen with Avicii, and then most recently here in the Netherlands with Delete and some other artists as well. Like mental health is a really serious topic.
Yes, so this is always a super challenging question for me to answer because, like, I'm also very honest, right? Like, I'm honest as in we've hosted so many mental health talks, right? Especially, I think it started during the pandemic. So prior to that, I feel like in the music industry, mental health is not addressed. Luckily and unluckily, due to the people we've lost, we are finally starting to talk about it and like prioritize it and bring it up. And it's not this like, oh, let's not talk about it type of situation. So for me, I feel like we started doing a lot of mental health talks. Like if anything, there's a mental health talk every other event we host on top of, a more, let's say, tangible music business type of talk and workshop. So it's something I'm really passionate about. And luckily, we've been able to connect with artists just through our community that's equally as passionate about it, but vulnerable to be able to share. And although I've hosted a lot of these talks before, I will say, like, if anyone else is in the music industry, I think we understand that mental health is one of those like non-linear things. Like one day you can feel amazing because let's say I locked in this amazing partnership, or you, DJ person, like signed a track. You're like, woo, on top of the moon. Then the next day you're like, man, I'm shit, like this is not working out. So it's one of those like super non-linear things. And for me, like it's been especially hard to talk about because like I've just gone through like a lot of personal things like this last year, including like losing my dad. So for me, I'm like, okay, I am not in a good mental health space. And my personal go-to, which is not healthy, like I'm aware of this, is work. That's the only thing I know. That's the only thing that's like controllable, right? We can't control relationships, sometimes health things that come up. That's like just some things are just out of our control. So when my, let's say, personal life is out of control, the only way I know how to find control or peace or I don't know, some sort of like grounding is what I do know, which is my work and my efforts and the things that I can create in this world through my community, through my company, like through Neon Owl. So that's my go-to. And I'm saying this because it's not super healthy because I like get burnt out very often. But I also know it enough to like acknowledge it and be like, okay, so the last couple talks that we did mental health, I asked another team member to step in because I was like, okay, what's going to happen here is I'm just going to start crying on this mental health talk. So not that crying is bad, but I don't think I can, I'll be super choked up when I'm hosting it. So I was like, hey, ABC, like, hey, Julie, hey, Marco, hey, whoever, I'll ask other people to step in to facilitate that open door sessions for me, that talk, that mental health talk. And that's how I'm prioritizing me, right? Like I've usually never done that because I'm like, okay, no excuse, like just get it done. But recently I'm like, okay, I know that if I'm not my best self, it's probably not going to be the best programming. Like there's a fine line between toughing it out, which I do 99% of the time. And then the other 1%, it's like, okay, acknowledging like, it does show up when I am not fully there. So sometimes it doesn't make sense to push through and just it makes more sense to like ask for support. So I've been doing that more, aka 1%, 2%, 3% of the time. And my team has like noticed that about me. They're like, oh wow, Elaine, you did not host a single open door sessions in January except for Groove Cruise. Like we were on Groove Cruise, it was like pre-programmed. On Groove Cruise, we hosted 2 open door sessions, but we didn't do any virtuals. We didn't do any cities. We won't be doing one the month of February either. And December was like super light. Like we didn't do anything beyond like early December. They're like, this is a change. And I was like, because I feel like there needs to be like some sort of stability and clarity and not just trying to churn out events or a lot of everything when like things aren't right. With that said, March, we have 5 events, right? So yes, there's a certain level of making up for it. But for me, how I've been dealing with that is just like acceptance. That's been my word. That's been coming up a lot is like acceptance of, sure, I'm not like a superhuman. I do a lot of things that may seem that way, but when I'm not in a good space, like I just have to like acknowledge that and like lean on people for support, which can be challenging because trust is a big thing, especially when it's like my company, my baby. But I'm learning to trust, right? Like learning to like delegate, learning to allow other people to like help me with certain things. And I'm also learning to say no, which is so hard for like a doer. I am just like yes to everything, but recently I've been finding myself saying no or no, not right now to a lot of things. So that's the best way that I can say I'm dealing with my mental health. It could be much better, right? Like I went to yoga. I went to like Kundalini yoga like 2 days ago, and I was like, this is not doing, but I already knew it was more like a yoga that's less doing and more like breathing and like being with oneself. So to me, I was super uncomfortable because I was like, okay, first off, I'm like wearing all black and not yoga clothes. And then secondly, what was chanting stuff? And the instructor was like, how do you feel? I was like, this is interesting. And then after he was like, how do you feel? I was like, that was interesting. So I felt a lot of resistance, but I've been trying different things that might just serve me mentally, emotionally, and like holistically and not necessarily just work, but in turns, it will serve my work and my community. And then, I booked like a trip to Vietnam, which is not work related, right? But I think in turn, I'll find new ideas and new ways and new problem solving, things that might come up while I'm there because I'm more at peace and I'm not just surrounded by the things I'm usually surrounded by, like shows every week, like all these things. So that's what I'm doing to like for my own mental health while maintaining all the programming that we do around mental health.
Yeah, it's really hard. I struggle with exactly what you said too. I'm a workaholic. I love to work. I always say like it's not that I get like high from working, but like I do get a sense of like I love to work. Like I wake up every day like excited to start working. Especially now because I do see certain things growing and like yeah, I just feel a sense of purpose with what I do. And I think when I'm stressed, it's like, okay, it is something I can control. Like I can control what I do in my work and I'm really good at what I do. So that's definitely a challenge. And what you said too about saying yes to everything, the early 2000s movie, The Yes Man with Jim Carrey. I need the opposite of that. Like I need like I'm that person. Like I literally, if someone's like, do you want to go skydiving? I saw a meme on Instagram, like people who don't have kids are like, oh, want to go to Africa on Thursday? Like that's me. Like I'm not spontaneous, but I'm literally down to do everything. I've done every kind of job. I've been in so many different industries. Like I can do anything and like I'm down to do anything, but at some point you need to say no. And it isn't like all of my trips are based around festivals. And that's something I'm trying to work on now as I'm about to go to Vegas.
Go to ASOT.
Yeah, as I'm about to go to a State of Trance and then Dylan Dino and then Vegas and Tomorrowland and like 20 other things. But one of the things this year that I want to do is like, well, what are my other hobbies? Or like, what do I want to learn?
What festival trip am I going to go on?
Yeah. Like I was thinking maybe snowboarding. Like my partner's really into that. And like, I'm like pretty athletic. So like, oh, maybe try snowboarding and just other hobbies that are like not work and not music related. Because right now I think my only like non-work hobby is the gym. And that's like not enough. Like you need to have like all my other hobby. I like dog sit now. Like I have a dog coming tonight, but that's like not really a hobby. There's kind of like side hustle / hobby. But yeah, it's really hard to That's hard to do. So thank you for being so open and honest about that. And hopefully people can learn from that too. And like, it's okay. You don't need to go out tonight. Like, you don't need to like take on 19 more I love side hustles. I'm the queen of the side hustle. I have so many of them, but at some point it's like, is this really worth the extra $50, $100 that it's bringing? And it's costing you all of this time. And yeah, so I can definitely relate to that. But yeah, we're really coming towards the end now. This is the question that I ask all my guests on the podcast. How do you rave for a cause or party for a purpose in your life?
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, for the most part, that's kind of been touched on like throughout this whole
I was just thinking that you already
time,
answered
right?
it.
Like, it's like literally like everything we do, there's some sort of like purpose in mind, right? Like whether that's an event, there's usually always some sort of charity component, right? Because I'm a big believer in, even though we didn't make money for the first 7 years, I'm a big believer that like if you can't give away a fraction of what you make, maybe there's some quote, like if you can't give away 10% of blah, right? Let's say $1,000 or $100,000 that you make. I doubt you're going to give that away when you're a millionaire or a billionaire. So like that's always the mindset I've gone about. Even if I had nothing, there's always something to give, right? Something doesn't have to be money. Something could be like food. It could be money. It could be resources. It could be like sharing of a cause, right? Like putting it out there, shedding light on that. So for us, from day one to now and everything we'll do moving forward, there will always be a charity component. But outside of charity, it's about like the community building, right? And welcoming people in or being able to spread love and like support others and like coming from a place of service. Doesn't matter if it's serving these DJs, producers, doesn't matter if it's creating space. Like, believe it or not, like a lot of people that come speak, like the speakers, maybe they're more established artists, right? Or managers or booking agents or festival curators. They also find some sort of like therapeutic, I don't know, thing by coming to do the talks or by giving, right, to these up and coming artists and industry people. They also feel like their cup is filled. So for me, whenever I create or curate something, it's always like, how can we come from a place of service and not like, what can we get? You know, like, what can we get? Getting like receiving will come, right? Because I think karma is a thing and like energy is a thing. So for us, it's always been like, okay, how can we serve? How can we give? And things have always come back, maybe like super delayed sometimes, but things have always come back. Like recently, we've been seeing a lot of like people like reach out or like they've heard of it or heard of us or they want to participate. Where once upon a time, it was just so much cold calling and like some convincing, you know, like it's just like a lot of that. So I do feel like what comes around goes around. And that's something I preach to our closer community. We're like, hey, at an event, go talk to that introverted wallflower person because that could be you. Like
Aw.
that could have been you, you know, like because you know, producers, 90% of them are introverted and they're like, oh, I'm going to this networking event. Oh,
Aw.
so scared. And I'm like, okay, go talk to someone. You should not be like talking to like your bestie. Just go like make someone else feel more comfortable, you know? Like so that's how we try to um share like the culture with everyone else and we always try to pay it forward.
I love that. Thank you so much for today. So, final question, where can people connect with you online? Where can they find more about Neon Owl?
Yeah, so we have we're pretty active on Instagram. That's Neon Owl Co. Co. Our website's also neonowl.co. So we're pretty active on there. Sometimes it's a team, sometimes it's myself. If you want to connect with me personally, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's Elaine's World. So you guys can connect with me there. But yeah, we're at a lot of events. We're probably coming to a city near you. So
Ooh.
reach out. We're like super, you know, open and down to meet new friends. So yeah, we'll connect you guys with you guys online or at the next city and event or festival.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for today, Elaine. I hope to see you again soon. Have a nice weekend too.
Awesome. Thank you
All
so
right.
much for having me.
Yeah, bye. So that was my episode with Neon Owl. This interview was years in the works. This was a long time coming. Like we said in the episode, we got connected through a mutual friend and former podcast guest, Emma Capotis. So during one of my conversations with Emma, she suggested that I reach out to her. So I did. And then from there, we became friends. And then I was the guest speaker at her mastermind session. Back last November. We linked up in Amsterdam last October at Amsterdam Dance Event. So it was so awesome chatting with her, having her on the podcast. Long time coming, like I said. And as we talked a lot about in this episode, the mission of Neon Owl aligns perfectly with that of Drop Bass Not Bomb. So speaking of the podcast, speaking of everything, I wanted to give you guys an update on the season and what's to come, and also like where I am right now. So I'm in Sacramento in California. I'm here for work, hence like work clothes. I am headed to Vegas tomorrow. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, just sort of like, where are you? You guys know there's so much goes into this podcast. So sometimes I need to record on the go to get things out on time. So okay, so this is the final episode of season 3. So let's do a little recap. So it's been an incredible season. We kicked it off last September, actually, with Looney Tunes. And that episode was about his approach about forgetting, I was about to say a bad word, forgetting genres, like forgetting genres, foregoing genres, and focusing on just the music. He does have there is a genre called F genre. So that's why my inclination was to say that, but we'll keep it family friendly today. Then we had another amazing DJ on the podcast, High Society, in the dubstep and bass music genre. He talked about the overlaps between metal and EDM, which is really common. Then we sat down with a corporate raver on how she balances her full-time job and raving, also doing that all the time, something I know very, very well, as you guys know. Next, we dove deep into all things EDC Orlando. And then we had Devore on the podcast. He is an Australian hard dance DJ. Then we had the infamous prankster duo,